Oxalates have been quite a hot topic recently since now we're all concerned about anti-nutrients in our foods, right? There's a lot of talk about how oxalates are terrible and why we should be avoiding them. Spinach being the biggest suspect in this investigation, as a cup of spinach can give you about 650 milligrams of oxalates. In this video, I wanted to go over what exactly are oxalates, why they are being classified as an anti-nutrient, are oxalates bad for the kidney, and whether or not you should switch to low oxalate foods. So stay with me till the end. Also, real quick guys, before we get started, it would mean the world to me if you hit the like button down below for the YouTube algorithm and turn the bell on next to it to stay up to date with new weekly videos. Let's start off with what oxalates are for beginners. Oxalates, often called oxalic acid, are natural compounds found in vegetables, fruits, nuts, and grains. Here's a list of foods that you can find them in: spinach, beets, peanuts, rhubarb, and even chocolate. But the body can also create oxalates as just part of a normal waste product made by the liver. And basically they're just essentially colorless anions. And an average person eats about 200 to 300 milligrams of oxalates per day. And when we eat these oxalates, what happens is they bind to other minerals to form compounds. The two big ones are calcium oxalate and iron oxalate. And they form in the colon, kidney, and along the urinary tract. And for the most part, we don't have a hard time eliminating them in our urine and in our stool. But some people who we will look at do have trouble eliminating them. But what are the parameters though? What is considered too much oxalates in our urine? That's a very good question. We have literature that suggests that an oxalate excretion of over 25 milligrams a day is an increased risk factor for stones, and that over 40 milligrams a day should be considered an indicator of primary or secondary hyperoxaluria, which is just fancy for too much oxalic acid in the urine. But why call them anti-nutrients though? One of the main concerns is that since they can bind to minerals in the gut, it stops the minerals from being absorbed. So something that's supposed to provide you nutrition is stopped by something else, and that thing is called an anti-nutrient. And there are going to be several factors that affect the level of oxalates in foods, including the growing season of foods, weather conditions, and the species of the plant. Let's take a look at our example for spinach, the biggest suspect here. Avon spinach may have a higher oxalate content than something like butterfly spinach, and cooking the spinach is said to actually reduce the oxalates in it. Same goes with the other vegetables. A good way to reduce oxalates is by cooking and boiling, just FYI. But if you're saying that a typical person gets about 200 to 300 milligrams of oxalates a day, but a level of over 25 milligrams in the urine is considered high, what happens to the rest? Well, thankfully, we have a gut friend called Oxalibacter formigenes, which to our surprise likes oxalates and breaks them down to use it as energy. Having this friend in our microbiome significantly reduces the amount of oxalate in a person's body. This is why some people who experience recurrent calcium oxalate kidney stones have less of this bacteria. And we have data to support this actually. In Western societies, it appears that our friend colonizes the gut of 30 to 40% of the population. Stone formers are colonized at approximately half of this rate, and those not colonized are 70% more likely to develop a kidney stone, which shows just how important our microbiome really is. Even earlier in the literature, it talked about calcium. Now, did you know that required calcium we need is around 1,000 milligrams to 1,300 milligrams for some people? The data shows us the amount of dietary calcium in the diet has a significant effect on urinary oxalate excretion, which increases when calcium intake is low and decreases when calcium ingestion is elevated. In other words, urinary oxalate excretion is higher when calcium intake is low, 400 milligrams a day. So basically, you need adequate calcium so that it can bind with oxalate in the intestines before it moves to the kidneys. Eating foods with calcium is a good way for oxalates to leave the body and not form stones in the first place. Not too much calcium and not too low of calcium. There's a fine balance of where you should be at. So those are our two big friends, Oxalibacter formigenes and getting adequate levels of calcium in our bodies. But what about just lowering the amount of oxalates we eat in our everyday foods? Yes, this can be a very good solution too, and many are actually implementing this if they do get recurring kidney stones. Sticking to under 100 milligrams of oxalates per day, ideally under 50 milligrams if you've had more than one kidney stone, can be a viable approach. There are some foods that are actually low in oxalates that you can try swapping, papaya being a great one. But surprisingly though, most urinary oxalates are actually the ones formed naturally as a waste product in the body, less so from dietary oxalate. But that's not to say swapping high oxalate foods for low oxalates don't matter. They actually do. Many oxalate foods are also rich in other nutrients and often double as fiber-rich, high magnesium foods as well, which you could still enjoy by boiling and steaming your favorite vegetables. But I did want to turn our attention to some rare conditions as well, like type 1 primary hyperoxaluria, which is associated with a mutation in the gene encoding AGXT, which has a genetic component in which the liver doesn't make enough of a certain protein that prevents too much oxalate from being made. Or if the protein doesn't work as it should, which causes kidney stones, especially when we're younger. Then there's also enteric hyperoxaluria, which has to do with intestinal problems, which can increase the amount of oxalate in the urine. Crohn's disease is an example, and so is short bowel syndrome, which can happen when parts of the small intestine are removed during surgery. But I'm more curious to actually hear from you guys though. What are your thoughts on this topic? Would love to read them down below. If you found this video useful, hit the like button, and until then guys, I'll see you on the next one.